Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the fifth in our series of The Road of Recovery. I'm talking to leading HRDs of large and interesting companies. And today, I am delighted this morning to be joined by Graham de Guise, who is the Chief People Officer for Osborne Clarke. And I'd like to welcome Graham to join us. And Graham, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and who Osborne Clarke are?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for inviting me to join you this morning. So Osborne Clarke, we're a full service commercial law firm. We turn over 320 million euros to give you a sense of size and scale. And about 60% of that is based here in the UK. My role is heading up that HR team responsible for HR strategy and delivery across the business.
Great, thank you, Graham. It's great for you to join us today. I think that what we're going to focus on today is firstly a little talk about how the employee experience has changed in your firm over the last year and what those challenges have been. And then to focus on how you're responding with a refreshed and improved value proposition, talking about the areas of inclusivity, development path, sustainability, environmental, social and corporate governance and justice, I guess, so that we can really understand and learn from how we need to think about our employee value propositions to keep our employees engaged and keep them really with us through the journey, as they have, stayed with us so far through the journey. But the next years are going to be, I imagine, quite challenging. And so we need to kind of think about that. So that's the purpose of today. Two areas. One is what are the challenges you've experienced? And the second is how are you responding to that? So I'm really excited about that. So Graham, tell me, my understanding is that, or my expectation is that at Osborne Clarke, you have probably seen more change in the last year to ways of working and the way your colleagues are delivering services, etc., to their clients than probably the previous 20 years. So can you tell us a little bit about the change which has occurred and how different it is now from what it was perhaps a year or two ago?
Yes, certainly. I don't think we're alone in obviously having to adapt very, very quickly to the effects of the pandemic and the way in which we delivered our services. And the legal sector probably has a reputation of maybe not being the most modern of sectors, a little bit traditional, should we say, although I wouldn't say that Osborne Clarke are a traditional law firm. So we had to move, like I'm sure everyone else on the call, into a virtual world virtually overnight. Now, a lot of our teams are based predominantly office-based. A lot of the work we do is collaborative. So we had to very quickly put in the technology to make that work effectively. But more than that, we had to very, very quickly put our arms around our people and line managers and equip them sort of mentally as well as, if you like, in the physical environment to working remotely. So we've spent more time looking at well-being over the course of the last year than we have personal development. So the personal development has really been focused on getting through and equipping people over the last year, and that has been, a real learning point for us, and that's changed our attitude, I think, to the way in which people will be able to work flexibly as we go forward.
I'm assuming, Graham, that most lawyers are telling me that they've made kind of more progress in the 12 months to agile and working away from the office, etc., than the previous 20 years. It was always on our agenda, right? But we could never kind of make it happen.
No, and I think once again it's that traditional model of being in the office. There's a lot of law firms in particular that dare I say, it's the focus on presenteeism, and you've got to be in the office to be able to get the right quality work, and you seem to be keen. We've never been like that, but what I would say is that we've had agile working in place for 3 or 4 years, but it wasn't as inclusive as it should have been. So it was available to the lawyers, but if you're in business services, you just tended to migrate to the office because you were supporting the fee earning population, and that's the bit that's changed. We've absolutely leveled the playing field now for everyone across the business to work flexibly and empower them to make the decision on any given day where the best place will be for them to work, their clients, their teams, and themselves. So that's been a voyage of discovery, and we were a very inclusive culture already, but to really kind of break down those barriers, I think it's been important.
And I'm assuming that the business hasn't kind of stopped growing and developing. So there's presumably people who have joined, graduates and new starters who have joined the business during the last months, who, their experience must have been completely different from what it would have been previous years. Because I imagine back in the day, I'd have put my suit on, turned up at Osborne Clarke Central, given a nice 2-week induction or something like this, met a few senior lawyers, maybe even taken out for lunch and stuff like that, all the kind of stuff, which presumably is a really different experience for those new starters. And
that's right. Firstly, I'd point out that we don't wear suits at OC, but yeah, we do if we're meeting clients that wear suits. But I have to say, we've had a dress for the day policy, Tom, for the course of the past 2 or 3 years. So you're more likely to see jeans and t-shirts. But anyway, you're absolutely right. So we've had trainees, the graduate trainees that join us. We take between 20 and 30 each year into the UK firm that have never set foot in our office, and that's a real challenge. So we have absolutely focused on that piece around supervision and well-being, it is all about creating a sense of community for that group. So you create a sense of community within that trainee group, or that cohort. There's peer support, individual one-to-one support, and it's all about spending time with the individuals, albeit in the virtual world, to making sure that they've got the comfort that they need to be able to do what they're tasked to do. But the old traditional law firm model was, when people had offices, and we haven't had offices for a while, you sit next to the partner and you learn by sitting next to them. That has totally gone out the window.
Absolutely. And that, moving on to the value proposition, that means at least there is an enforced change to the value proposition. So as a graduate, if I was interested in law and wanted to join Osborne, then I would get to sit next to one of the senior lawyers and experience what it's like to be part of a dynamic law firm, and understand that. But presumably that's an enforced change to the value proposition, because Osborne Clarke can't provide that anymore. So I'm really interested in how you've responded in changing that employee value proposition and rethinking it, Graham, for it to meet a completely different employee experience.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to be changing, back again. The pendulum will swing gradually back as we return to the office. So we are taking our time to really decide what sort of law firm we want to be for our people, and that's why we have decided to step back from just looking at the hybrid working model. And I think everyone has been focused around how many people are going to be in the office, what percentage of time people are going to be in the office, and actually they're kind of missing a point that the new way of working is going to drive a much bigger people proposition. So we are looking at, of course, the hybrid working model, but we're also looking at a new reward strategy. What does that mean for reward? What does that mean for how we develop our people? What does that mean for inclusion? So that's what we're sitting back and doing. But in terms of looking at the physical working environment, first of all, we've gone as far as saying we're a people business. We expect people to be in the office for the majority of time. Now, we think that's whatever it is, 50 or 55%. because we want to have that sense of collaboration and togetherness that supports our unique culture. But beyond that, we are empowering people to make the decisions on any given day, as I mentioned earlier, to work in a place that's right for them, their clients, and their team. Now, one of the things that we are completely conscious of is in giving people that choice, we need to make our offices destinations. We need to make them as attractive as they possibly can. So we're in a lucky position that we are moving into brand new office space in our Bristol office, but we have spent the last 6 months redefining the design of that new space and looking to make it a much more inviting and collaborative space for people to attend. And it's not just about having a kind of yoga studio and we're lucky enough to have the space, a kind of spin studio, and we will be having both of those in the office. We're very lucky to have that. But it's also looking at how we can make the interior environment as attractive as possible. So bringing the outside in, we're lucky enough to have a roof terrace, making that accessible to all and space that people can spend time and collaborate.
I'm assuming, Graham, this is a bit more than banging a few pot plants on the desks. So, you know, can you visualize for us what this change is going to look like? So how fundamental is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fundamental. And look, there'll be a few pot plants, Tom, and a bit more greenery around. But it's actually, we went out to our people and said, what facilities would you like in the office? And what would you like to see? And they said, we want more, if we can, get more outdoor space. So, you know, we've got a terrace in London as well, and that just wasn't being used. So we've opened that up, and we actually did that just before lockdown. But we'll have a variety of different spaces. We'll actually even have an indoor garden where people can sit around, and it's creating spaces, different zones, if you like, so people can get their head down and come in and work. And you know, if they've got to review documents or do a bit of research, they've got space to do that. It's creating space where you can collaborate without desks and without meeting the walls. And it's also about creating flexible zones. So we've got a cafe, for example, that we can turn into a major event space. And we can also turn into a kind of fitness zone as well. So it sounds like we're throwing a lot of money at it. Yeah, it's certainly an investment, but it's just using the space more creatively to deliver things that people want. So these aren't things that we thought might be good ideas. They're things that we've actually road tested with our employees. And we've shifted our design, particularly of the Bristol office, to take on board you know, people's views. And
so that's the physical change to the employee value proposition. And that's really interesting. So it's just making it more flexible, making it more, presumably you're expecting that to change over time as well.
It'll have to.
Yeah. So that's the physical value proposition. What other areas have you put into the new value proposition?
So we're looking at our reward strategy. So we're kicking off a big exercise in relation to that, and that's not just looking. I mean, law firms have a fairly traditional remuneration model. So we're looking at a number of different facets to that. Firstly, we're looking at the mix, our reward mix between pay, bonus, profit share, how we introduce more collaborative and teaming elements to that. We are also considering you know, something like a share ownership model, and or the John Lewis model, where people can more broadly share in our success. The other thing that we're doing is looking to create an investment pot for the firm. So that's beyond a certain profit point. That's investing back into the firm in terms of our people, and investing above and beyond in terms of our communities. We've got a very, very strong community strand to what we are about. So those are some of the tangible things that we're doing, and we've restated as a firm kind of our mission and our purpose. So we're a firm that really wants to, and this is our mission statement, to make a positive impact for our clients, people, and communities. And we want to, build on that inclusive culture that we've got.
Tell me, Graham, how do you envisage this investment pot being governed? So, what I kind of imagine is that that a certain amount of the profit and turnover is hived off into this investment, which is a community-owned asset. Presumably, it's owned by the employees and the firm together. But how do you decide what happens to that pot? So, how do you envisage that happening?
Well, I mean, it's early days, but we're just getting that through the partnership in terms of a resolution. But we will have a governance committee to ensure that is used effectively. We're drawing up a set of core principles, so being very clear and transparent about what that pot can be used for. And we will report back on a quarterly basis to the firm in terms of how it's been utilised. And that transparency is very, very important. Okay.
And then, you talked about the physical side, you talked about the reward strategy. I've got some questions coming in, which I'm going to pose to you in a second. But then what are the other strands of the new value proposition, Graham?
Well, it's certainly around how we develop our people, and we are investing a huge amount at the moment in terms of our people development regime. We are also looking at our career progression and our career ladders. So we've taken on board some feedback from our BAME network, actually, and we've always prided ourselves on our inclusive culture. But for a recent engagement survey, we run these very regularly, came back, and our BAME colleagues said, well, it's a great culture, but it's not quite as inclusive as you think it is. So we did a much deeper dive on that through our BAME network and engagement week. And we sought feedback, and essentially one of the things that came back was, we don't think that Osborne Clarke are sufficiently transparent about progression and promotion processes and how decisions are made. So we think it's a bit opaque. So one of the things we're undertaking is a review of all of our promotion processes, fee earners and business services, and making sure that they're completely transparent. We thought they were, but clearly we weren't doing a good enough job. And ensure that we're educating all of our people on our competency framework, on promotion processes, on the criteria that we use. Because there was a feeling from our BAME colleagues that said, look, we've got a sense that it favours those with confidence to kind of ask for more work or push themselves forward. And culturally, that doesn't sit well with all of our communities. So that's something that we want to really address over the course of the coming months. And we've got a full review on those processes that are about to kick off. So it's that clarity of progression, being clear where you sit, what you get for where you sit in terms of reward, in terms of development, in terms of feedback. Those are some of the tools that we're looking to.
But I really like that openness theme and that openness to kind of feedback and start. I mean, one of the things, the observations yesterday, and the kind of the Dominic Cummings talk and all that, there was a lot of stuff hidden about the debates, about the approach to that broader set of issues, which didn't need to be hidden, and actually would have been better had the debate point being open. And it sounds like you're moving a bit towards that to try and open up things like the clarity of the career progression and how that works and what the criteria are, rather than the kind of what we're all used to, that kind of disappearing into a office and then somebody coming out, with what your result is. Yeah,
I think that's right. And the one thing we haven't touched on is I suppose the sustainability angle and on the people proposition. So we've had what we called a sustainable business group in place for the last 12 years, and they've been very successful and very active. We had a change of leadership there because our leader of that group retired, and we are using that as an opportunity to further re-energize that area of focus. So what does that mean? We are firstly, we've undertaken a carbon audit. We are using, and we're rating the output actually from something called the Carbon Intelligence Report, which are doing a sort of deep dive on our sustainability from an emissions perspective. And we're setting clear net zero targets, but we're also awaiting the recommendations to take forward through our new ESG group under that new leadership. So that's a really important pillar. We've also ensured that in terms of our new building, and once again, fortunate enough to be moving to that new building in Bristol, that it's as sustainable as it can be. So in terms of its BREEAM rating, its WELL rating, but also we're moving from a situation where we had one of the biggest car parks in the city centre in our Bristol office. It's 30 plus years old. 150 spaces. We're moving to a place where it has I think 20 spaces, which we will use essentially for clients and for those with accessibility needs. And we've got a team looking at mobility solutions as we speak. So we just put out a proposal document, and we are engaging with potential suppliers to look at, for example, a single app that will say, I live in Fish Ponds in Bristol, and this is how I can get to work in a sustainable way. Here are the different aspects of the journey, linking into bus timetables, whatever it may be, car sharing. But it also, that single app also allows you to book desks across our real estate, for example. So you know how you're going to get to work, you know when you're going to get to work, you know you'll have a desk there. It's moving people away from contracted car parking spaces to a much sort of greener way of and sustainable way of.
So tell me, Graham, I'm hoping you're going to turn the rest of the car park into a nice garden and stuff like that. I really am.
Well, we're moving totally out of that building, so the lease of that we're getting rid of. But that was part of our search, that we wanted to move to a much more sustainable environment, and that includes addressing the very big elephant in the room, which was our car parking. And people love the convenience, don't they, of jumping in the car. And we're unusual that people, most of our people get to park underneath the office, but it's just not a sustainable way of going about our business.
Absolutely. And, as I'm going to run through some of the questions now, but, that sustainability, people are talking about their companies being wholly sustainable, not just elements of it, etc. So this revitalization of the sustainability committee, are you setting them ambitious targets, Graham?
Yeah, we are, and they will report to our executive board on a quarterly basis. So a number of things they're doing. They're setting up a sustainability council. That's the governance elements of that. They're setting up a community called OC Planet, which is there to engage everyone internally with our sustainability agenda. But we're also looking at how we link in to ensure that sustainability is part of all of our business development and client interactions. So that's something that group are working on. But yes, absolutely. We're setting them targets, but actually it's the firm's targets. They're facilitating us getting there. So it's the board that needs to take ownership over the delivery. It's the sustainability group that are helping us get there.
So Graham, you've told us about how you're bringing changes to your value proposition in the physical area, the reward area, the development area, in career progression, in the openness, and also in sustainability. But one of the questions we've got is, why did it take the COVID crisis for us to recognize that our value propositions need to change very significantly. Why was this not happening anyway? So there are clearly there's going to be great benefits to your employees from revisiting that value proposition. But what stopped us doing this before, I guess, and why do we need a crisis to bring it on?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is nothing that stopped us from doing it before. Certainly at Osborne Clarke, we've had a very inclusive culture. How do we know that our culture works for our people? Through feedback, through engagement surveys, through external benchmarking, and we've never stopped, I suppose, evolving as an organisation in terms of that people proposition. I think what has happened is the pandemic has just accelerated that change, and I think people's attitudes have changed over the course of 12 months in a way that they haven't done, as you say, probably in the previous 10 years. So we have to be alive to that. So we weren't sitting on our hands saying, oh, our people proposition is great and we don't need to do anything with it. It evolved. We've introduced new career frameworks, for example, for lawyers 2 or 3 years ago. We opened up our promotion process to be more inclusive, a number of years ago. It's just that this is we looked at it and thought, okay, there's a change point here. We could go down a narrow alleyway and just focus on that hybrid working model, but no, this is bigger. This is a once in a kind of 10-year shot, if you like, to really rewrite and revisit the whole proposition. Let's not be lazy about it and focus just on the hybrid working model. Let's look at what the whole thing means for our people and do it in a connected way.
I think that there is something which has stopped us progressing. I think there is a barrier, but I don't think it's particular to any one organisation. It's just that we are all creating what we used to aim at creating: stable and clear organisations, and stability was a key part of that. That in itself generates a stasis that really means that you create something and then it is solid and then it stays there. And I think that's the problem. Most of us in our careers, our big leap is starting work. And then when we've got into the work environment, that's the last leap we expected to take. And we kind of stay the same through much of our working lives, and that creates a kind of the reverse of momentum, which is really hard to bring change. And so I don't know about you, but in the past, bringing transformative change, and it's obviously what Graham does, was really, really hard in organizations. I think that the COVID crisis and the can-do attitude it's created amongst many of our employees, many of our colleagues and our customers, etc., means that we have an opportunity to embrace that. If we can grasp this new value proposition, which people need to do, and then apply it, this is our opportunity to bring really positive and long-lasting change to our organizations. And so, whilst at the one hand, it's been a catastrophe in many ways, the COVID crisis, on the other hand, it has generated these positive opportunities, which are really exciting, I think. And from an HR perspective, you and I, Graham, worked in this area for decades. I've never seen the ability to bring positive change as great as it is now in many organizations.
I think that's right. And firstly, most people like routine, don't they? So you get into that routine of your way of working, and you've probably worked in a similar way for a number of years. That's just kind of human nature. I think what has happened in the last 12 months is that the sort of power of the employee has risen kind of even further, and they've got more say, and quite rightly have more say in terms of what they want from an employer, in terms of where they work, the type of company they work for, the values. And I think that's why employers are having to listen, and that's why that change is
absolutely. I mean, there's really exciting change for me. I get to choose my office chair now rather than tell my office manager what to sit on. So next question which has come in is, what methods are you using to poll and understand what your colleagues want? So how are you getting, because this is one of the big problems, which is that we're trying to guess. How are you guys polling and getting that information from your colleagues?
Yeah. So generally, we use two, I suppose, core methods. Firstly, a regular engagement survey. So we have run an annual engagement survey every year for the past 3 or 4 years. We've replaced that with regular pulse surveys, so quick surveys across either the whole population or parts of the population around sort of workplace attitudes. So we ran one at the start of COVID in terms of how people were feeling, just all around well-being. We then ran one back in October of last year, which was thinking about focusing on returning to work. So what do you want? How, we actually asked people, do you want to come back to the office? If so, how many times a week? What are your fears? What are your concerns? And we were just very open in A, the questions we were asking, and B, the results and the answers. So we fed all of those results back. So the surveys have been really good because people feel that A, they're being listened to, and B, they know what the results are. But, we're not just sort of hiding them somewhere and doing nothing with them. And the other piece is we've involved people in sort of focus groups, things like in terms of office design. So we've gone out to stakeholders right across the business, right across them, saying, what do you want the office to look like? And we've also run focus groups on what we are calling connected working. So that's our sort of branded agile working. And we said, okay, we've heard your results from the survey. Let's talk about it in more detail. So we've run virtual focus groups.
Yes, exactly. I did notice you talking through how you've got a reward group, a sustainability group, a BAME group, etc.
Yeah.
And that's something which, of course, bigger firms can do quite well. So one of the questions is, do you have any reflections on how smaller companies are and kind of be attractive to the best talent, because they can't offer the same value proposition as you are describing.
No, and it's not about the shiny office and, as you say, the kind of spin studios. Those are nice to have, but they're pretty niche items. I think how do smaller companies compete? I think it's about having a clear purpose, being able to articulate that purpose, both internally and externally. It's to have what I would call an authentic culture. What does that mean? A culture where everyone can genuinely be themselves. And it's creating the environment when someone walks in, if you do walk into a physical interview anymore, where people can associate with that firm. They know what it stands for, and they see role models that are like them. And I think that comes back to that inclusion and representation. So it's not about throwing money at it. I think it's around transparency, authenticity, knowing what you're good at, being able to articulate it well, and just being clear to that vision and purpose.
It is very interesting because to some extent we've all become companies of one with virtual collaborative virtual networks during the parts of the COVID crisis. So we are basically working autonomously, but within our various communities.
Yeah. And
some of those communities are within work, and some of them are outside of work. But it's none of us have had that. We're not. I don't turn up to a 10,000 person office and feel that I'm one of the great, masters of the universe type ideas. That kind of thing's gone because we are actually all in the smallest of units in our daily working. I'm sitting here in my office all on my own, which is I think very interesting. It's a very interesting angle for smaller companies. I think actually smaller companies have a real opportunity to be able to tailor their working experience to the particular needs of their team, their staff and colleagues. And I think actually my suspicion is that the challenge may go the other way, which is it's how do the bigger firms keep up?
I think that's right.
That fleet of foot.
I think that's right, because we're just not able, because of size, to be anywhere near as flexible as those smaller organisations.
So in creating this new value proposition, have you had to employees contracts? So, are you looking at changing their place of work and stuff like that within their contracts? Question from one of the.
Yeah. So we haven't gone as far as that at this point. We, as I said, we believe that we will be spending the majority of the time in the office, so 50+%. But one thing that we absolutely are looking at is the more flexible workforce idea. So we've had a number of remote workers in our organisation, not huge numbers, but that's worked very well historically. And you know, the pandemic has shown actually with trust that we trust our people, and actually, you know, for those that can, they can work very well from home. So we will certainly be looking at roles, and indeed if any individuals or individual wants to pursue more of a permanent home working arrangement. We've got a few in the business. Are we going to change wholesale contracts? No. It'll become custom and practice that people will have kind of more flexibility. And you know, say it's the environment of trust. We're not going to have a 100-page booklet on, if you like, the rules around connected working and working agilely. It'll be based on trust, and we'll work with people. And when it doesn't work, that, you know, we'll deal with that on a line management basis. But no, I don't see wholesale changes in contracts. It's more about the psychological and emotional contract that we're changing, rather than, you know, the bits of paper. But certainly we will need to communicate that to our new starters as well. Yeah.
Yes, and presumably, I know there is underlying that, I suppose, a cost issue in that there's a possible divide that those have to pay to get into the office, and those who don't, I guess.
And that's something that we absolutely have to look at as part of our reward strategy. And you know, is there a place anymore? Question for sort of regional salaries. You know, we've got 3 offices in the UK. We need to challenge, you know, the assumptions around regional salaries and ask if there's still a place for that or not. So yeah, that's a big piece of work.
So are you changing the benefits as well? So for example, do you have a cycle for work scheme? And is that and other schemes being added to that kind of benefit side?
So we've had cycle to work scheme for probably about 9 or 10 years, I think, before my time, certainly. But we've got a flexible benefits kind of offering, so people can kind of pick and choose kind of cafeteria style. One thing that we did introduce this year was a green car leasing scheme. So leasing electric vehicles, once again, not for everyone, and so on, but that's one of the kind of new additions that we've put in place. I have to say our benefits mix, I think, is pretty good. Our main focus on reward, whilst we will look at benefits, is around that mix of base, bonus, profit share. But we introduce, I'd say, probably 1 or 2 new benefits per year based on based on feedback, and green car leasing was one of those this year.
Yes, I've got one second. Okay, I'm going to come on to that question in a second, but I wanted to ask you, Graham, as we come towards the end of this conversation, I wanted to ask you, how urgent do you think it is? You talked about changing the physical reward structure, more openness, development, sustainability, overhauling the value proposition which Osborne Clarke are providing. And I guess you think that's a good idea, but how urgent do you think it is for us to be addressing this? Because I guess as increasingly we're going back to work, things are possibly going into the new normal at this point. Is this an urgent thing? Do you find your employees are really clamoring for it?
Yeah, it is an urgent thing, and you know, we're signposting our intent in relation to the way we see that hybrid working in particular operating. But our sort of EVP won't report back until late summer, early autumn. So the output of the kind of deep dive. So we think it's important to do it once and do it right. You know, rather than rush something through. But we're signposting, and we're being very transparent with all of our people. We're looking at our people proposition. We're looking as part of that at our reward strategy. It will also impact, you know, how we interact with the office. As we return, this is the overarching principle that we see. So we'll be working on that basis. But you know, we'll be, you know, delivering greater clarity back at the back end of the summer. So that's how we're planning it. We certainly don't want to rush it and get it wrong.
I think it is really interesting that the COVID crisis over the last year has made us realize how our employees, our work colleagues, our working life, our relationship with our work and colleagues is fundamentally very different from simply a profit motivated organization and reward in that way. And I think that the idea that, what we've seen over the last 50 years with the Friedman doctrine and all that kind of stuff is that the only social responsibility businesses have is to return profit to their shareholders, partners, etc. And I do think, and it's been suggested by one of our viewers, that actually that's now fundamentally changing, and that actually those organizations who do not address this change and do not recognize that there are more important things or things which sit alongside that responsibility are going to get left behind and are going to quickly suffer. So with that final comment, which is brilliant, so thank you very much, David, for that. And Graham, I'd like to thank you very much for your really useful conversation about changing a value proposition. I think it's particularly valuable coming from a law firm where many of us see them as organizations which are not the most rapid at changing value propositions and stuff like that. So what you're doing is even more meaningful, and it's clear that you're kind of really taking this on, and that is very very exciting and heartening. I think for the rest of us, what Graham is giving us is a call to action to re-examine our value propositions for our employees and make sure that they are up to date and that they cover all of the different areas which Graham has described and maybe more. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending this morning. Thank you for your brilliant questions. Thank you again, Graham, for your input and your comments about Osborne Clarke. It's fascinating to hear, and wish you all a great day and a great rest of the day. And thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you at the next event. So thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Thank you all.